any questions to our panelists, please use the Q&A function that you can find in the bar at the bottom of your screen. And so let's start with the webinar. I will give you a brief introduction, and I will quickly explain the flow of the webinar. So at your level, we have witnessed increasing efforts to prevent food loss and waste. And by the end of 2023, the European Commission is set to present legally binding targets to reduce food waste across the EU. By conducting their activities, food banks belonging to European Food Banks Federation do not just support the resilience and functionality of the food system and provide food to charities helping people in need, but they can also play an essential role to support EU policymakers and food business operators in resolving the challenges related to the achievement of these targets. So today, next to the interventions of high-level speakers from the European Commission and also from the private sector, food banks representatives from 5 EU member states will introduce and will present their best practices to prevent food waste and to foster food security, which is under increasing pressure, especially today due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, but also the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. So to open this event, I'm really pleased to welcome Fabienne Santini from DG Agriculture and Rural Development of the European Commission. Fabienne is also a representative of the European Food Security Crisis Preparedness and Response Mechanism. So Fabienne, thank you very much for joining us today. And I will give you the floor and you will you will have the honor to start this webinar, sharing with us a bit an overview at European level. So what's happening in terms of food security, food crisis, and what are also the future outlooks. So thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
The beginner mistake not to unmute myself. Thank you very much, Angela, for this introduction. I'm Fabien Santini. I work in DG Agri. I'm Deputy Head of Unit for the Governance of Agri Food Chains in DG Agri. And indeed, like Angela mentioned, and particularly it's the unit particularly in charge with this new European Food Security Crisis Mechanism that was established late in November. In fact, I will come back a little bit to the reasons why we adopted this new mechanism late last year. And you will all remember that the Farm to Fork strategy was adopted in April 2020, right in the middle of the COVID crisis. Where we all were, I think, surprised to see images and press coverage and elements showing empty shelves, files of trucks at the border, starting of panic hoarding by consumers in some supermarkets. Queues to enter to supermarkets. These were things that we were not used at all anymore, and it served as a wake-up call that food security is not granted. Food security, in fact, is one of the early reasons why the EU started to be built. In the late 40s, in the early 50s, we had the last famines in Europe, in the EU still, and that was a major driver for constructing Europe, not the only one, but it explains that one of the first policies implemented right after the signature of the Treaty of Rome was the Common Agricultural Policy, dealing with the objective to secure the supply of food at affordable price for EU consumers, well, at that time, European Community thing. And so everybody had forgotten that early. In 2019, food security was an old-fashioned word. So you could see what happened during COVID. That was the wake-up call. And we have a second one right now, where if you open a newspaper today, you have food security everywhere. The Ukraine war has an impact on food security in the sense that it risks putting several million tons of grains out of the market and just lost because it's impossible to bring to where they need to be consumed or impossible to produce next year. It all depends. We are monitoring the situation, but clearly these are concerns, and you read them every day, for global food security. And there's There might be no concerns in terms of supply and quantity for the EU, and we'll come back to this, but it has also a consequence in terms of affordability, and affordability is one of the key drivers of food security in the EU also, so that is something that we need to look at. So COVID and also the Ukraine crisis show us one thing, is that our food system and supply chains are resilient. They cope with crisis mode, and we saw that in the COVID, despite all these wake-up calls and images. In fact, never there was a serious problem of shortage of food. And this is thanks to several reasons. First, we are a net exporting bloc in terms of agri-food products, and that allows us, in fact, to not depend from too much from what happens elsewhere. But also we have a diversity of supplies, diversity of food produced, diversity of farms, diversity of climate, of terroir, or of soils, diversity of types of supply chains with very long and complex thing relying on complex transportation and multimodal and interdependencies, down to direct sales from farmers to consumers. And this is an example where we were resilient, and that we saw that in the COVID. At the time, the long chains had some problems to cope because of transport. Well, the short ones were there to compensate, and we had an immense boost of the demand of consumers to short supply chain. So in this picture, the Commission and the Union has decided to step up the preparedness. It decided to step up the preparedness in front of crisis in all the sectors, in health, in transport, in cyber attack, in single market, in the definition of critical entities, etc. But for food security, the element triggering this is the creation of this new European food security mechanism, because even if we cope with resilient system, we know that we can do better. And we can do better, we saw that during COVID, in particular by improving the collaboration between the public sector and the private sector. Collaboration to enhance the preparedness. So one of the things we did is that we created this mechanism, which is in fact a group of experts that is gathering at the same time member states, certain non-EU countries that are completely imbricated in our systems like the Balkans and Switzerland, and the stakeholders and representatives from every part of the stakeholders, from the farmers, processing industries, retail, of course, but also some users, consumers and food banks, some providers of inputs, the logistic itself. All these people are gathering together to enhance the preparedness, and we will go through a mapping of the vulnerabilities of our food system to try to find ways to mitigate these vulnerabilities. This collaboration is also important when the crisis starts, to detect together early signs of crisis, to detect also what could be the unintended, unforeseen consequences of the events, be discussed fast, quick, to be ready to together have a common analysis and understanding of what is unfolding, so that we can all better coordinate our mutual response by the EU, response by the member states, by the regions, and by the stakeholders themselves. Another important element of the functioning of this mechanism is that we need to improve the information available. And we have done a lot in the Commission to improve market transparency in general, but there's still work to do. And we will also carry out a mapping of what could be improved thanks to digitization. Another thing is the ensuring the principles of continuity of the food chain. So that was very recognized as a key element during the COVID, is the setting up of green lanes, so that the single market continues to work, because as soon as something is not working somewhere, there's a consequence somewhere else. And we learned from that, and you just saw last week the adoption by the Commission of the communication on solidarity lanes with Ukraine, precisely for the same reasons. Because if it's not circulating, then there will be a problem somewhere else. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the important lessons of this. And last element I wanted to mention on these work program we have for the future is crisis communication. And it's particularly important in the time to avoid hoarding. Like last month, people were buying sunflower oil in big quantities. There is no reason to buy sunflower oil. There is no shortage of vegetable oil in the EU. So this is clearly the kind of information to convey to the general public, which is difficult because in times of crisis and in times also of more less credibility of the official channels of communication, or at least they are challenged, it's important to find the right way. So to wrap up, we had 3 meetings of this mechanism due to the Ukraine situation. I think it served its purpose of detecting together what would be the thing. We consider now, and as a consensus in these groups between member states, stakeholders, and the Commission, that the current situation with Ukraine is not putting at stake the EU food security. I mean, generally speaking, of course, there are still problems everywhere, but then we mentioned the affordability aspect. But generally speaking, we don't need to enter in a crisis mode for this situation. There are other reasons to enter in crisis. That's why we will discontinue the urgency functioning of this mechanism, but we switch to a work on continuing to improve at medium and long term the preparedness, and it served a lot also to feed the elaboration of the response of the Commission to the current mechanism. I quoted already the solidarity lanes, but we can also quote the important communication of the 23rd of March on food security and improving resilient food systems. The information exchange in this mechanism was crucial to help drafting this communication. And we will continue this work. And there is important that the Federation of Food Banks is present with us. And I'm really glad that you are present in this mechanism, because you are bringing to this overall picture a particular knowledge, which is the situation of the most deprived, and these aspects of affordability of food, which are important to ensure food security. This is why I'm really glad to be with you today, Angela. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Fabienne. Thank you for, let's say, setting the scene and sharing with us this overview. So thank you really for your opening remarks and for highlighting the topic of food security, but also food affordability. Today, as I said at the beginning, we have the pleasure to share also some best practices from 5 EU member states regarding the recovery and redistribution of surplus food. So I will present the speakers in a few minutes, but before, please allow me to spend a few words on a policy document that we are releasing today. This document is focused on FIBA's position on the proposal for EU-level food waste reduction targets. So starting from the statement that food banks have addressed the systemic inefficiencies and misfunctions of the market, providing a tangible solution with positive effects on food business operators, but also on the planet and on the people, especially the most vulnerable people. In this document, FIBA supports the adoption of, first of all, a target to reduce food waste, covering the whole food supply chain from farm to fork, because we firmly believe that in this way, we can not only achieve the SDG target 12.3, but we can also incentivize all food business operators to donate their surplus food when occurring, when they are available. Then as a second point, we propose a target expressed as a percentage for food waste reduction from the amount of food waste in a baseline line, which is 2020, to a target here, which is 2030, because we believe that the use of percentages can promote a positive competition also between different member states. And it's also easier to make a comparison. We also propose a target level which is differentiated by member states, because we believe that it's important that these targets are also in line with the different levels, so the different member states' national legislative frameworks. In addition to this, as FIBA, we strongly support the use of the EU food use hierarchy as the basis of the concept of food waste prevention. So, and we also propose that specific support and funding should be given to food banks or other no-profit organizations that are dealing with food donation, so that in this way we can strengthen their ability, but also their capacity to conduct and to carry on their activities. So this is, in a nutshell, what we are presenting in this policy document that will be released today. The document has been possible only thanks, I would say, to the contributions that we have received from our members, who are those who have the knowledge on the ground at national level, but also really at local level. So I would like to warmly thank them for their contributions and for their support to this document. And I'm really glad that today we have the a representation from our membership. So five members will present 5 different best practices that will further shed the light on food donation. So let's start the panel with the participation of Dimitris Nentas, who is the Managing Director of the Food Bank Greece. Then we have Benoit Colonna-Ceccaldi, who is the Head of Food Hygiene and Safety Department at the Fédération Française des Banques Alimentaires, so from France. We have Veronika Lakova, who is the CEO of the Czech Federace Potravinovic Bank from Czech Republic. We have Greta Cagliotti, who works at Fondazione Banco Alimentare Onlus. And Emma Walsh, who is the International Partnership Director of Food Cloud from Ireland. So welcome to our members, our food bankers. And we will start with Dimitris. So Dimitris, can you present us your best practice, which is recovery of fresh produce from the manufacturing, but also from the distribution sector? Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. So this is an action about saving food and specifically saving fresh fruit and vegetable. We started working with just one company about donated potatoes, fresh potatoes, some years ago, and that was a very useful experience for our food bank. And then a year ago, we established a new partnership with the Central Athens Grocery Market. This cooperation is still in a pilot phase, and twice a week we visit a few specific companies inside the market, and we pick up whatever surplus fresh fruit and vegetable they have. At the beginning, it was very difficult to motivate both the administration of the market and the producers as well. We had tried to make our voice to be heard, to persuade just one producer to donate some surplus food that is impossible for them to sell. But we also have to consider that producers and wholesalers in this sector, they don't have either any marketing departments, nor they are not familiar with the SDGs, and considering their other daily difficulties, it's not easy to motivate them to sort out whatever is difficult to be sold and to donate it to the food bank. So the key factor for our project was to raise awareness, not just generally, but focused on the stakeholders inside the market, inside the grocery market. Even the workers in the market need to understand how important it is to redistribute food instead of throwing away. So after that, the second step was to set up a new logistics system to be able to handle perishable and delicate products that must be immediately directed to local charities and to be offered to people in need, in some cases, even the same day. So for us, it was a challenge, but it was something that it was more easy to handle it. And we finally did it with success. The only matter was that building up a new logistics system comes together with some additional expenses to transfer food through the Athens, through the neighborhoods. Of course, we needed to cover that these new expenses. So far, it's not something so significant, but if we want to scale up such procedures to save even more food from more stores in the market and even more days a week, then it will be something that we have to deal with in the future.
Okay. So thank you very much, Dimitris, for sharing this practice and also the challenges that you are faced and that you have overcome, and also your future, let's say, plans to further develop this activity. So thank you very much. So now we move to Benoit from France, from the French Federation of Food Banks. So Benoit, you will present us a best practice which is focused on the manufacturing sector. So can you explain us a bit how the French food banks are working with the manufacturing sector? Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everybody. Traditionally, when the French Food Bank were created in the middle of the 80s, most of our supply was coming from supermarket. That is a product with a very short shelf life, unstable quality, especially for fruit and vegetables, etc. So now we try to move to more direct supply. That is, we increase the connection with wholesalers on the one side and on the other side. And we have a tool to be able to distribute hundreds of pallets at the same time. That is, when a food producer has, for whatever reason, has hundreds of pallets of a specific product to distribute, they can call us. And this is put on the platform. And we have 12 regional distributors who say, okay, we need 12, we need 15, etc. And in 1 or 2 days, we can ensure the product is properly distributed in all of France. So this is very powerful for the food producer, because they have the insurance that the product will not be lost. It will be whatever the quantity. Most small associations are not able to distribute big quantities like that. And so this is very powerful to be able to say to the producer, you can give us whatever, any quantity, even very big quantity, and be sure the product will be treated properly, in good condition. We have large refrigerators, we have trucks, etc. So we are able to manage that. An example is, for example, with a dairy company whose name is Candia, whose brand name is Candia actually. And each week they have a meeting, an internal meeting, to allocate the production of milk. As you know, the cows cannot stop producing milk, so every week they expect a certain quantity of milk coming, and depending on the market, depending on the internal needs, this milk is allocated to make cheese, to make yogurt, to make fresh milk, to make stable milk, that is UHT milk, etc. And we are included in this sharing. That is, each week, Candias tells us, this week you will have fresh milk, you will have stable milk, cheese, etc. And so this is very comfortable for us, because we need the quantity which will be allocated to the food banks every week. So for us, this is a very comfortable, I would say, very comfortable, because we have a stable supply of dairy product, which is a good quality product with in nutritional terms, etc. So this is our example for this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benoit. So now we move to Veronica from Czech Republic, who will present us a practice and activity which consists in transforming fresh products in local food banks. So Veronica, can you tell us a little bit more? What are you doing in Czech Republic?
Hello.
Here you are.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Sorry. Well, good morning, everybody. I hope I'm already on because I wasn't sure that it was correct.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Angela. I will tell you about our practice in transformation of fresh food, mainly fruit and vegetable. Actually, we have a very good, let's say, retail market chains cooperation all around the country. We are cooperating in all market chains. All retail market chains which are connected to the regional food banks in each region. Well, but we had a kind of problem, quite big one, because we weren't able to accept from time to time, we weren't able to accept a large amount of vegetable or fruit, which was seasonal. And of course, also our charities sometimes during the weekends or the holidays wasn't able to accept this surplus fruit and vegetable. So we were trying to find some way in cooperation with retail market chains which are who are forced a little bit to give us as much donation as is possible, and of course they want to donate us fruit and vegetable, but this food is at the end of the life, and we needed to prolong some way this shelf life, or to transform it to some other form which is possible for the next distribution, for the next week's distribution, or maybe in months. So we tried to cooperate with a retail market chain Albert, which is situated in Czech Republic, and they provide us to start pilot kitchens which are connected directly to the food banks. In these kitchens, the fruit and vegetable is transformed by drying or fermentation in some cases, or also by pickling, making it sour. And we started in one kitchen also the old bread fermentation, which actually is in a basic that we make from an old not consuming bread, we make a new one with half of the need of new things, with half of the need of new flour. So now we are able to get to our final beneficiaries and to our organizations much more fruit and vegetable in dry form, or in pickled form, or in jams. It's not in this very moment, it's not so much about the tons, it's more about the hundreds of kilos, because we have now 3 transformation kitchens. 4 was already established 2 years ago, and 3 are new one. And we are now trying to establish more of these kitchens with cooperation of retail market chains. So actually for them it's also that the win, because they can to support us with more vegetable and fruit. We are able to transform it, we are able to deliver it to final beneficiaries, and we are trying to improve it in all regions. These kitchens were also very helpful in last weeks, because they also worked for the help for the refugees. So they were very fast transformed to bakeries, to cooking services, to making baguettes, and to drying anything what was necessary. And they helped a lot in this crisis situation as well. So it's something new. It's not already about tons, how I said, but it's a start. And I hope we will be able in the next few weeks, the next few years, to make this good practice in other regions. And I want to thank to our Italy friends and French friends when we were for the ideas and for the inspirations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Veronica, for sharing with us this new activity. So even if, as you said, it's still at the beginning, it's something new. So it shows also the innovation of food banks. So in speaking about innovation, I will give now the floor to Emma Walsh from Food Clouds in Ireland, who will present us the concept, but I would say also the reality of virtual food banking and how innovation can help us to achieve the SDG target 12.3. So thank you, Emma, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Angela. Food Cloud started, just like Veronica mentioned, as something very small and as an idea in Ireland about 8 or 9 years ago. And it was the idea that you could use technology to connect local businesses that had surplus food directly to charities and community groups who were close by these businesses or in the same community, that could go directly and pick up this food. So it's a virtual model of food banking because it doesn't require the warehousing and the trucks that we typically require in food banking. Instead, we use technology to notify local charities and communities about the available food from their local businesses. So starting out with just 12 stores in Dublin on a pilot, and a huge thank you has to be said to Tesco who took the initiative to do this. So we started out from a small pilot, and now it's grown over many years to the stage where we have about 1 million meals redistributed every week using the technology. That happens across 4 countries. It requires many partners. We work with lots of food banks. We work with lots of charities. We work with lots of retailers. So the technology is an enabler, but it requires all of the amazing partners that we have to participate and you know, work at implementing the solution. It's been, I suppose, incredible to see it, particularly in the UK. So we've been working in the UK for about 5 or 6 years now in partnership with FareShare, who are another FEBA member. And 30% of the food that FareShare redistribute every year is redistributed using the technology or using the virtual food banking model. We're very happy also to work with the food banks in Slovakia and the Czech Republic, and it's great to see that over time we're redistributing about 150,000 meals every week across these 2 countries in partnerships with the retailers and the food banks here. So I think, you know, ultimately the Food Cloud is a technology solution. It's an enabler. It has huge potential to add another dimension to food banking. So it's not taking away anything from what already exists. It's another opportunity to add new and innovative solutions to redistribute more food. Hard to reach food from across a whole, I suppose, geographical footprint. And this is another benefit of the solution. So FareShare in the UK went from working in about 300 towns and villages to about 1,300 towns and villages in the UK because they were able to extend their footprint beyond their physical infrastructure of their warehouses. So we see huge potential for scaling this, huge potential for working with more food banks. We have many more food banks who want to work with us. We have many retailers who want to work with us. We now see businesses that have ESG targets and commitments and objectives that they want to fulfill, and it's no longer acceptable that good food goes to waste. So this is all very possible. There's an awful lot we can do. We have many solutions, but I suppose one of the big challenges for the future is how do we fund these, and how do we make sure that the really good work of the food banks is recognised as being such a massive contributor to SDG 12.3, and the proper infrastructure that they need and the resources that they need are there to be able to take advantage of these sorts of innovations for the future, and that the value that they contribute to society and the food security crisis is rewarded and funded. So thank you very much. That's all about us, and thanks for the opportunity to present, Angela.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you because you always explain technology in a very simple way and understandable way, I would say. Well, the impact of food clouds is evident, and as you said, there's a big potential. So we listening to you and also Veronica, so there are many new initiatives that are taken by the food bank, and so another one that we would like to share today is the City Cibo program from the Italian Banco Alimentare. So they will focus today and they will explain us how they recover surplus food, especially from the catering and also from the HoReCa sector. So Greta, thank you for being with us, and well, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. City Cibo is a program created in 2003 to recover cooked and fresh surplus food from the catering and the HoReCa sector. Surplus food is daily recovered by volunteers of local food banks, and then it is redistributed to charities which help people in need. Charity themselves often carry out the recovery after being trained. In this case, they have to send a copy of the transport document to the local food bank. City Cibo is an example of micro-logistics, not involving a centralized warehouse and focusing on urban areas. Since 2009, City Cibo volunteers recover also fresh and frozen surplus food from the distribution sector. For give you an overview, in 2021, from the catering and the HoReCa sector, we recover 318 tons, which includes, for example, ready meals, bakery products, fruits and vegetables. While from the distribution sector, we recover 16,324 tons, which includes bakery products, fruits and vegetables, but also dairy products and fresh meat. As Banco Alimentare Network, we have learned that a favorable regulatory framework is essential, and the National Law number 166 of 2016 has encouraged the donation of surplus food. Different additional aspects are important. On the one hand, a close relationship with the donors, and on the other hand, to consistently monitor the surplus recovery activity carried out by charities to ensure the compliance with hygiene and food safety standards. To this end, it is essential to have a manual of good practices, which we drew up in 2015, so before the national law was issued, in accordance with Article 8 of Regulation number 852 of 2004. Of course, there are existing challenges. First, establishing a close relationship with the donor companies to promote the donation of all types of perishable food products and guarantee high quality standards. Second, facilitating non-profit organization access to equip themselves with tools for transport, storage, and digitalization of processes. And finally, it's very important to digitalizing administrative and data management processes to improve the monitoring of the recovery activity and the documentation of donation. So this is our case study. Thank you, Angela.
Thank you very much, Greta. So now we will move to the next part of this webinar. So following the presentation of these case studies from some of our members. So I'm really glad now to introduce Bartosz Zambricki, and apologies for the pronunciation, from DG Health and Food Safety of the European Commission. And then in this panel, we will have also Bruce Lerner from Kellogg. So starting with Bartosz, what we would like to hear from you, if you could tell us a little bit more your work, the work that DG Santé is doing on setting legally binding targets to reduce food waste across the EU. What's the objective, and also what are the next steps? And how do you see the contribution of the food bank? So what can we do to help the achievement of this important objective? Thank you, Bartosz.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, you pronounced my name quite correctly. My name is Bartosz Zambrzycki. I work in DG Santé, where I am dealing with, for most of the time, with preparation of legally binding food waste prevention targets. I think I would start from saying, what is legally binding prevention target? So basically, this is a target for which, if the country does not fulfill it, then the country is taken to European Court of Justice and asked for quick corrections. If it fails to act, then it's fined. It gives financial fines until the targets are met. So this is instrument which is used when some actions are necessary, but it is then up to member states to decide how to solve the problem on its national territory. So it enforces the results, but gives the country the free selection of options to achieve it. So as you can imagine, that the countries are very cautious with accepting such targets, because it's, well, of course, they all like to meet political commitments, but if you fail political commitments, not much happens. If you fail the legally binding target, then it haunts you until you deliver. The member states they have to provide a legal framework for solutions, organizational framework, provide the resources. So when they decide to support such target in legislation, then it's something, then we can be sure it will be delivered. The aim of the target. Basically, it's environmental target. It stems from environmental legislation. It will be part of a big revision of Waste Framework Directive. The main aim is, of course, then the efficient management of resource, avoiding landfilling, incineration, composting, biogas of food, to keep as much as possible food in the food supply chain where it is being used efficiently. So I would say that support to food banks is a bit of side effect of that. But of course, the fact that it's side effect means also that we like to exploit the positive side effect to maximum. As you earlier referred to food use hierarchy, yes, the food redistribution is on top of food use hierarchy. It's basically that the food is used in line with its destination to be consumed by humans, which is then much more effective, regardless of any way of measurement of matrix to other potential uses of food. Where we are now, we are at this stage of preparing of impact assessment. Last October, on the website of EU Commission, it's called Have Your Say, we have published Inception Impact Assessment, where we describe what we intend to do and all start gathering views from stakeholders. So this is, in fact, the last available official information. Now we are working on preparation of proposal and explaining why the proposal will look like it will. So we consult with stakeholders, starting from targeted consultations with expert stakeholders, where we want to find out the information about costs and efficiency of the action. So as we all know that, in fact, prevention will bring a big environmental benefits, that it's clear, but in fact we like to know how much it actually costs to put such measures into action, how much it costs in terms of money, how much it costs in human resources, when the results comes. So this is all to help us prepare a sound, reasonable, justified position. Now, other than targeted consultations, which are already ongoing, and I would here, of course, like to thank FEBA as it's very good to have this one-point contact for very important sector of our activity, so for food banks. We very soon will publish open public consultation, which are then not, which are aimed basically to everyone, to wide public, to know then more about their views on food waste and potential results of applications of reduction of food waste. Finally, the whole proposal is to be adopted. I think that the current planning is that we would like to have the proposal ready by the first half of next year. So 6 months earlier than previously thought. Of course, as there are a lot of factors which may influence that. Also that the food waste is just a part of a big revision of waste directive, which will cover many other things like textiles, plastics, etc. So, I mean, I am to ensure that our part will be ready and will be well integrated. And then when the proposal is adopted by the Commission, it goes to be proceeded to adopted both by European Council and European Parliament. So this gives this legitimacy. I mean, we do not impose anything on member states or on which they haven't signed themselves. So that is then understandable that we take them to the court only if they fail the obligations to which they have agreed. Now, the role of food banks. So for the moment, it is mostly on to help us with analysis. So SFEBA is doing that. So to have this data about costs, efficiency, and I would like to reiterate that we are not interested only in pure financial costs, but also very much in times of human efforts. Because this, I guess that if you count it in an honest way, the most of input required is actually human effort to work there, but also to organize it, because it is a high organizational challenge. For future, I think then it's more to food banks in individual member states. When the member states will have to prepare a strategy to meet their targets, I guess that then it's a big task. Of course, you can start already, but big task for food banks to illustrate how much you are a part of solution. That in fact, how good is the return of any investments in food bank? Because I believe that yes, investments on food redistribution is actually the best return on investment when the member states will have to reach their targets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bartosz, and thank you also for giving us some recommendations so how we can contribute at EU level as FIBA, but also our members, what they can do once the proposal will be adopted at national level. So we duly take notes and we will follow up on this. So now we will give the floor to Bruce Lerner from Kellogg, who will share with us a little bit the perspective of a food company. So, well, first of all, thank you for joining us, Bruce. And so from the perspective of Kellogg, so a food company, so what do you think about this discussion about the targets to reduce food waste, but also in more, let's say, general terms, how do you see the collaboration with food banks and a food company as a possibility or an opportunity to ensure both food waste prevention, but also reducing food insecurity?
Thanks very much. Great discussion. Phrases like legally binding always make me nervous, whether it's professionally or personally. Our approach on let me give you a bit of context in terms of food loss and waste reduction, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the relationships with the food bank. So our approach, we're members of Champions 12.3. So we've voluntarily agreed to follow the Target, Measure, Act approach promoted by RAP and in the UK and Champions 12.3. And we publish our food waste data every year in our corporate responsibility report. So if you go on to the Kellogg website, you can see the last figures, which I think are for 2020. So our focus is on food waste, which includes food sent to animal feed. Okay, so we want to reduce food loss as it's food waste as it's defined by the WRI, the World Resources Institute, but we also want to reduce the amount of food that we send to animal feed because it's far too good to be sent to animal feed. So that's the basis of our target. It is a 50% reduction in absolute volume terms by 2030 versus 2015. So 50% reduction of the levels of 2015. So that's the first thing. That's our approach, and that's the approach we like. And I think more companies should consider adopting that approach. A couple of other thoughts for you, which I think are relevant to this discussion. If we are successful in reducing food waste during manufacturing, that won't automatically equate to more food to donate to food banks because it's not edible food. So from that perspective, and I read your report and your favoured focus on the farm, and indeed some of the examples we've heard this morning of fresh food, that makes perfect sense to me. Because if we're successful, I very much hope we are, in reducing food waste, that doesn't automatically equal more food to be available to donate to the food banks. So I can see why you are focusing on the farm, because that's where there's probably more opportunity. But also that's where you can help enhance diets for people. You can bring those fresh fruits and vegetables to the table, to the food banks, although I suspect that probably gives you, or the food banks, more challenging logistical challenges. So that's the first thing we're doing. We've got a global target. We're aiming to reduce food waste in our manufacturing locations. It's a voluntary target, and we publicise that information. In terms of food waste and giving more food to food banks, here's a couple of things that we're doing. We're really, really trying hard to manage our processes better so that we have less what we call NPI, non-performing inventory. So NPI is the food that we haven't been able to sell through our preferred channels. And when we get this NPI, there's really only two routes for it. And the first route is donation, and the second route is animal feed. So our priority is to donate as much of this food as we possibly can to the food banks. And we've embedded systems, and we've embedded a culture whereby people understand that and they support that. But here's the thing, Angela, I've often joked to you in the past that our objective as a company is to have nothing to donate, right? And if we ever get to that point, you're going to go, well, on the one hand, congratulations, well done. But on the other hand, what about the food? So if I take a look at that NPI, I looked at some figures this morning. If you take France and Italy, we have 75% less NPI during the first 4 months of this year than we did in 2020. Okay, so we've really tightened up our processes. We've really tightened up the visibility of the stock, our accuracy of forecasting. And that's only going to be tightened up even more as the cost of these ingredients goes through the roof. So our objective is to have less food available for donation, but to donate more of it. So if I look at those figures again, so the pie is smaller than it was in 2020, but actually in France and Italy, we've donated 75 to 80% of everything that's available to the food banks in France and Italy. So for us, it's about reducing food waste as much as we can from a cost perspective and an environmental perspective. Where we have edible foods, we'll do as much as we possibly can to donate it to organizations like food banks. In terms of our cooperation, I think we're going to come onto that perhaps in another question a little bit later. But we're trying to make things more efficient, so the relationship between us is stronger and tighter. And I was talking to our supply chain person this morning, and one of the things we're trying to do, if you go back 5 or 6 years, when we had food to donate, we identified it quite late on in the process. Maybe it only had 30 or 40 days left. And then we would send the food bank a spreadsheet. And then people in the food bank would go through the spreadsheet, decide what they want, and then it would come back, and that might take a week, and there's only 21 or 20 days left. So what we're doing now is putting into place a system where we spot that food earlier, so it has more days left on it, which is better for you and more dignity for the people that use it at the food banks. And we're trying to pilot arrangements whereby we say, look, we're not going to give you the spreadsheet, but we will guarantee you a truck of food of this kind with this number of days left. And that then reduces the whole need to kind of have a backwards and forwards conversation on email. So those are the evolutions that we're trying to do to make the relationship smarter. I'd love to talk about the quality of the relationship we have, but I think we're going to come on to that later in the panel discussion. So I'll leave that for now. But those are my perspectives in terms of targets and the links between reducing food waste and making more food available for donation.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Thank you, because you are always very clear and straight to the point. So we have heard the perspective of the Commission and also the perspective of a food company. So now we are coming back to our food bankers who like to, so they already presented the 5 best practices, but now they would like also to make some recommendations. So how they would like to see things in the future. So we will have again Benoit, but also Greta, Veronica, and Dimitris. So we will start with Benoit. So you were presenting how the French food banks are recovering food from the manufacturing sector. And so also given the challenge of decreasing quantities of surplus food, what are your recommendations in order to be able to recover more surplus food from the manufacturing? And I think that it's also in line with the intervention of Bruce. So Benoit, what's your recommendation?
That's a good question. What we see is that as I was saying previously, that our old model that is mainly recovery from supermarket, etc., is not sustainable on the long term. Supermarket changes their strategy now. Instead of giving to food banks, they used to make bargains in the last days of the shelf life of the product, and so they give less to us. And so we need more reliable supply. And we had an example with what I said about the milk or dairy product, but we also have a good increase on our side. It more than compensates the decrease of the supermarkets, that is the wholesalers, because as you know, when 1/3 of the shelf life of the product is passed, the product cannot be sold anymore to a supermarket. And so this is a very good source of product because it's a long shelf life. It's still 2/3 of the shelf life. It's big quantity of good quality product. And so we try to increase also the supply on this side, that is the wholesalers. And so these are means to stabilize, I will say, the supply. At the moment, well, as you know, the number of beneficiaries increase. We have to give more and more product, especially during the confinement for the students, etc. So we have to find more supply, and we don't expect the old model to be able to supply all of that. And so wholesalers on the one side, food suppliers on the other side, and also we change our model. Despite being supposed to be a bank, we didn't used to use money. And now we, for the last 2 years, we have money to buy product directly from producer. So we expect to stabilize all of that using these different, let's say, alternative supplies compared to the original model. Also in France, we have, maybe you heard about supposed introduction of food vouchers. This is a project. This is very complicated to implement, it seems. Our political people used to speak of that for more than 2 years now and still not implemented. We have some objection on that, especially the lack of relationship with the beneficiary. So, well, we'll see, but this is another challenge for us, how to be included in this process of food vouchers. That's all I can say at the moment on that. Don't know what's your opinion for the future, but the less we can say is the environment is changing very fast on both sides, on the side of supply and on the side of needs.
Okay, so well, thank you very much, Benoit. If we go to Greta, so from the Italian Banco Alimentare, so you explain us the City Cibo program, and you also highlighted some challenges that you have. So do you have also any kind of recommendations in order to be able to overcome these operational and very, I'll say, concrete challenges that you face every day?
Yes, of course. First of all, I want to remark that it's very important to promote and encourage the donation of all types of perishable food products to information and training in companies, because companies themselves sometimes don't know the existing legislative framework. And it's very, very important that there are incentives for companies to donate. At the same time, it's crucial to support non-profit organizations to equip themselves with tools facilitating transportation, storage, and digitalization processes. So financial support, but also is very important, are key element, partnership and collaboration with all the stakeholders of the circular food systems.
Okay, thank you. Very clear message and a clear recommendation. So moving to Veronica, when you explain us the transformation that you are doing, so that you are processing fruit and vegetables at the food banks, and you said that you are still at the beginning. So also in order to be able to process more food and to, let's see, replicate this activity in other food banks or to scale up this activity in Czech Republic, what are your recommendations? What would you like to suggest?
Well, actually, my remark will be much more general, because as we heard, and also how I can see it in the chat and in the questions, we all are behind difficult situation, difficult times, and the prices are increasing, the market chains are changing strategies, prices are getting higher, costs are getting higher, and I think we all need to find new ways, different ways how to save more food, how to prolong shelf lives, how to work with the food which is donated, because it can happen that if we will only stays in the old school, let's say, and we will do it all like in other times, that we will have not enough food for the people in need, and it's absolutely necessary to find new ways, not in the IT or digital ways or supply chains or transformations. I think each country in EU have different ways how they have the food, how they get the food, how they have their donations, who they cooperate with, and there's also many countries they cooperate mainly about the fair, and they don't have so much surplus food. And I'm afraid that if we will not go in new ways and we will not try to share different practices and find different kinds of donations or working with surplus food, we will not have enough.
Okay, thank you very much for highlighting the fact that new ways are needed, especially today when the situation is more difficult due to the for sure due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the current situation between Russia and Ukraine. And so thank you for opening again the discussion and focusing your recommendation not only on the concrete best practice that you presented, but really with a broader message. So thank you very much, Veronica. And moving then to Dimitris, so moving to Greece. So you presented a best practice which was mainly focused on the recovery of food from the primary sector. So what do you think is required in order to increase this kind of activity to scale it up in Greece, or if you have also any recommendations at European level?
Okay, first of all, I think that the most important is not to give up. There are so many difficulties, and when you are knocking the doors of the producers and the farmers to pick up food donations, it's very difficult to explain why it's important to limit down food waste, etc., etc. So you need to be passionate, and all the food banks across Europe are dedicated on that course. So awareness and to inform the other actors in the food supply chain is always a problem and a challenge. On the other hand, as also happened to the other project, to the other food companies in other member states, funds is always a problem. We all have different projects about saving food, and expenses are piling up. And okay, we will inform more farmers and we will persuade them to pick up food donations, but at the same time, we need personnel to drive across the cities to pick up food. We need fuels for our trucks, etc. So even if it's not such a nice discussion, expenses and funds is always important.
Okay, clear. Thank you very much, Dimitris, for highlighting also these very, I would say, concrete recommendations and requests. So I would like to thank you again, all of you, for contributing to the policy document, but also for your time today, for presenting your best practice and for sharing with us your challenges, but also opportunities and recommendations. So thank you again for taking the time to be with us today. And so now it's time to go to our conclusions. But before, so we will give the floor again to Bruce Lerner from Kellogg, and we also have Christina Lisacci from DG Health and Food Safety from the European Commission. So coming back to you, Bruce, and so at the end of this dialogue today, so now you have also heard the recommendations of the food banks. So how do you really see the evolution of the collaboration? Well, you already mentioned a bit, but what are your thoughts that you would like to share with us? Well, especially also considering the disruptions and the pressures on the markets due to the crisis, the current crisis of COVID-19, but also the crisis in Ukraine.
Okay. For me, and I've said this before, so apologies if you've heard it before, but it's our relationship with food banks is a genuine partnership. It's a genuine collaboration. It's not, food banks aren't organizations that take food that we can't sell. They're absolutely not. They're an essential part of our global CSR strategy. So if we have a thing called the Better Days platform. It's our sustainability, our ESG platform for global. And there are 14 targets from, emissions reductions, food waste reduction, and so on. But there's one around providing food for people in need. And that target, we don't reach that target without food banks. So you're equal partners in us helping us have an impact on society. And it occurs to me when I was thinking about this, that food banks are almost becoming sort of disaster relief agencies. I think, looking back during the COVID pandemic, there was an expectation from people within Kellogg that we needed to do something. We were only able to do that through the food banks. So we were only able to deliver our CSR strategies during the food banks, during the pandemic, because of the food banks. When the recent crisis in Ukraine started, I was looking back at my emails, and I think the conflict started on the 24th of February. On the 28th, we'd already offered you cash. Now, I'm not saying that to show how good we are. I'm saying that to show how important the relationship is. We needed to do something to help. Who did we turn to? We turned to the food banks. So I think companies, organizations need to see food banks as partners, equal partners in having a positive impact, positive impact on society. One of the other things that we're doing is we are taking our relationship with food banks into the commercial environment more often. So we donate food, we donate cash, we provide volunteers. Increasingly, we're working with food banks on commercial initiatives in supermarkets. So right now, for example, in Italy, there is a partnership with the Banco Alimentare. There was one at the end of last year with the food banks in France. There we won this year in Spain. There's one on the shelves at the moment in the UK. And what we're doing here is we're saying, effectively what we're saying is when you buy a Kellogg product, we'll donate some money to the food banks. And what that does is that elevates the position of food banks within our business to commercial partners. Now, I'm not sure whether that's exactly where you want to be, but what that means is it completes that 360-degree relationship. And as a result of those promotional campaigns, we often donate cash. And Emma was talking about food being great, but you need cash to fund the initiatives. So this is another way in which we can support you. So, where do I see the relationship going? I see them becoming more holistic, more complete. I see food banks as indispensable in the way in which we can have a positive impact on our society and our communities. And I also see, perhaps more technological advances. We've never got there yet, but Emma and I, we've talked about sharing systems so that food banks have visibility in what stock is becoming available to donate, rather than have to have that kind of conversation between us. So I think that's probably a way off. But for me, as food becomes scarcer and the need becomes greater, the relationship with food banks can only grow stronger.
Well, thank you very much, Bruce. And we really, it's also our wish to have a stronger partnership with Kellogg, but in general with all the food business operators, so that we can work with the food supply chain. So now, and finally, I'm coming to Christina from DG Health and Food Safety from the European Commission. So, first of all, welcome and thank you for joining us now for the conclusions, of this webinar. So, and we will close with, we started with the European Commission with your colleague, Fabienne Santini from DG Agri. We will close with DG Santé. So where does the European Commission currently see the biggest challenges in terms of reducing food waste, but also promoting food donation? And how do you plan also to collaborate with food businesses, operators, but also the other stakeholders? So while Bruce was mentioning the partnerships between Kellogg, so a food company, and the food banks, but so how do you see from the perspective, of course, of the European Commission, the this holistic collaboration that he was mentioning?
Thank you so much, Angela. I hope you can hear me fine. First of all, I must say I'm delighted to be here today and hear this great testimonials from food banks across Europe. It is for us very useful to receive this information directly to know what is happening on the ground. And it is also very inspiring to see how food banks and companies stepped in to help feed people in need, also in the context of the Ukraine war. May I just start by saying that, well, working in the food waste, food loss and waste prevention policy, our main primary focus is to act directly at source by limiting the generation of surplus food at each stage of the food supply chain. And of course, if this cannot be achieved, then the best destination for food surplus, which ensures the highest value use of these edible food resources, should be to redistribute it to human consumption, of course, where this is safe to do so. And I would refer here to the fact that a lot of good work very useful work has been carried out at EU level to help organizations, but also companies, as well as public entities to further facilitate food redistribution. And you, as members of FEBA, and also FEBA as a member of the EU platform on food losses and food waste, you have contributed tremendously to all this work to facilitate food donation at EU level. So in this context, I would just like to mention the EU food donation guidelines that were adopted on World Food Day in 2017, to which FEBA and its members have provided valuable contributions to the elaboration of these guidelines, and which aim to clarify the relevant provisions in EU legislation in an effort to lift barriers to food redistribution within the current EU regulatory framework. So here, I hope you are all familiar with these guidelines, which were put together not only to clarify these rules, EU rules related to food safety, food hygiene, traceability, etc., but also to provide a common interpretation by regulatory authorities in EU member states concerning these rules that apply to the redistribution of surplus food. And here is something, a challenge that we see in terms of food redistribution, because at member state level, there are substantial variations as to the extent to which policy frameworks enable and encourage food donation. So from our perspective, more needs to be done to urge national public authorities to implement measures such as national rules or guidance, incentives, training, communications programs, whatever is needed according to the national context to further support food donation activities. From our side, I must reiterate the role of the EU platform on food losses and food waste. I hope you've at least heard about this expert group, which FEBA is a member of. And within the context of this expert group, we have a subgroup dedicated to food donation. And actually FEBA will be and is the co-chair of the subgroup this year, which means that they will be involved directly in defining the work structure, proposing actions that the subgroup should look at with priority. And we welcome the great proposal of FEBA to carry out an assessment of food donation initiatives across the EU that will offer us an updated and clear overview at EU and national levels of what is working, but also what's not working, the opportunities, the barriers to food redistribution, what are the strengths and weaknesses, but also what can be scaled up and replicated. And in the context of this exercise, which will be carried out by the food donation subgroup of the platform, we fully count on FEBA's support, but also yours and your experience on the ground to identify areas of opportunity to further facilitate food redistribution. I think another challenge is that struck us is how to reach, with all the great materials that we have, the great work that we've done at EU level, how do we reach stakeholders on the ground? And here, FEBA has really helped maximize outreach and the dissemination of the EU food donation guidelines, but also other supporting legislation or supporting information for food banks, but also other charity organizations to facilitate their work at national level. And I would like to end maybe with referring to the latest amendments that I hope you are aware of, adopted by the Commission to EU food hygiene rules. That were laid down in order to specifically promote and facilitate food donation while guaranteeing the safety for consumers. And these amendments have been carried out following feedback received from you on the ground. And they concern in particular a change to the regulation on the hygiene of foodstuffs, mainly an inclusion of a new chapter on food redistribution that addresses how the use by and best before date shall be applied in the context of food donation. And the second change, important one, would be on the regulation on specific hygiene requirements for food of animal origin, where freezing of meat at retail would be authorized under certain conditions, aiming to facilitate the safe redistribution of meat products by food banks and other charities. There are other things I would like to mention, but I'm sure, I mean, time is very short. We're a bit late, so I'm going to stop here. We're very grateful for the opportunity presented by FEBA today, because this gives us the chance to reach out to you directly and make ourselves available to any questions that you may have. And I'm going to put a link in the chat to our food donation and food waste page, where you will find further information and links to everything that I mentioned so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christina. Well, as you said, time is a bit short today, but I'm sure that we will have the possibility to continue this dialogue. And as you mentioned, in the framework of the EU platform on food losses and food waste for sure, but also as regards FEBA as co-chair, you know that we are available to support you, and we are really looking forward to working with you especially as regards the food donation subgroup. So we will continue this dialogue, and we will continue to work together. Before closing the meeting, there's a question for Bruce. So maybe if you want to reply with like a clear statement, a clear and final statement. So there's a question saying, you mentioned at the start of your first talk that you are not a fan of legally binding targets, so personal but also professional targets, legally binding targets. So can you explain why?
I think things happen that you can't anticipate, and you need the flexibility to be able to respond. So if you remember at the beginning, I talked about our transparency, that we published our food waste data in our CR report, corporate responsibility report. If you look at 2020 versus 2019, you'll see that the levels of food waste increased versus the previous year. And that's because the pandemic threw us a curveball. It made us fundamentally change the way that we did things, and we had to produce more food. And as a result of producing a lot more food than we planned, we produced more waste than we planned. So what that makes me think is that, yeah, you can set a target, but targets have to give a certain degree of flexibility to enable people to react to unforeseen circumstances. And clearly nobody would have foreseen in 2015 or 2016 that there will be a global pandemic in 2020. So I think it could lead to a hell of a lot less flexibility than we need.
Okay, so thank you very much, Bruce, for these last comments and for your availability to reply to this question. I would like to thank you all the speakers for sharing different but also very inspiring insights today with us. As I said, I'm sure that there will be future opportunities to continue this dialogue and to work together to prevent food waste, but also to foster food donation. I would like also to thank our audience for being with us today. I just remind you that the recordings of this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel, and also the policy document that we are releasing today is available on our website. So I invite you to go and read the policy document, where you will find also the 5 case studies that we presented with more details and information. So you can find the policy document on our website, eurofoodbank.org. A special thanks also to the FIBA team for making this webinar possible. So thank you very much. I thank you all again, and I wish you a very nice day and weekend ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.